Hello. Sam, you need to accept my invite. Okay, there you are.
Hello.
Hello.
Morning. How are you?
Alive. Trying really hard.
Yeah, I know. I know.
How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I'm excited for this. I check this out. I'm wearing my Hero Academia t-shirt.
Okay, good, good.
I just
Because
got in the mood.
okay, okay. Did you see the book that Lindsay had yesterday? She had a
No.
My Hero Academia manga that she
No.
was excited about,
No, I didn't.
but it had words, so she was sad.
Oh, okay. It was probably one of those like class briefs where it's like a book
Yeah.
and a manga.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I wouldn't read those, but I get it. You got a lot of Uber fans out there. I mean, my sister just brought me on Sunday, she brought me a deck of My Hero trading cards. So why not?
Do you have any other trading cards? Any other?
Uh, no, I don't really collect cards. She just saw them and she texted me and I was like, yes, please.
We do not turn down gifts. Like,
Exactly,
we
exactly.
do not turn down gifts. Okay, so it's great having you here. My sisters have been complaining that I'm not doing a proper introduction. My sisters are always complaining, so let me do a proper introduction. Welcome to the Real Bookworms of Insta,
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, thank you.
where we discuss our current reads, our faves, and other bookish things on our mind. Today with us we have Mr. Sam Zimor.
Oh my,
Da-na-na-na.
oh my.
Okay, great. Lovely. Lovely introduction. That was awesome. Okay, so let's start talking. Let's begin with my favorite question to ask, which is why did you start a public Bookstagram account?
Well, I actually have a writer's account.
Oh, forgive me.
It's okay.
Same question.
Sure. I started a writer's account because I got to a point where I was not connecting with any writers. I've always been the only writer that I've ever known, aside from my uncle. And I was like, you know what? I was getting to a point where the book was almost completed, and I wanted to start trying to connect with readers and writers and just see if I can, make some friends so we can talk about writing, the writing process, the different aspects of publishing, and just to see where it goes, as well as get the word out about my book, do a little bit of marketing.
I see. So I am going to ask you about your books a little later, but
Sure.
tell us a little about what you normally read. What are your favorite genres? What do you like to read?
Sure. I love sci-fi fantasy, and I always have, especially when I was a teenager. I loved young adult sci-fi fantasy, and I think recently, a couple years ago, when I was in college, I found out about grim dark sci-fi fantasy. And what grim dark is it's not your typical fairy tales and princesses and magicians and sorcerers and your traditional fantasy tropes. It's more, it's darker, it's grittier. There's a gray area when it comes to like villains and heroes. It's not that traditional black and white, dark versus light type of stuff. And it just really resonated with me. So I started delving more into that. So The Chronicles of the Black Company, the Night Angel trilogy by Brent Weeks, A Song of Ice and Fire, and I'm currently reading The Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. It's very, very heavy fantasy, very heavy.
I love high sci-fi and high fantasy. So would you say, you mentioned three books, I believe. Would you say that those are your top three books, your top five favorite books? What would they be?
Well, here's the thing. So I can't say books. I have series. I have series. Top three would be The Chronicles of the Black Company by Glenn Cook, the Night Angel trilogy by Brent Weeks, and I don't remember the third one that I mentioned, but I'll just give you a new one. It's the Monster Blood Tattoo trilogy.
Okay. Okay. So, do all of them have the grim dark aspect that you mentioned?
Most, I would say two out of the three do. The Chronicles of the Black Company, most definitely. It deals with a mercenary company. The what was the other one? The Night Angel trilogy is more like sorcery and assassins, so medieval court politics and violence. And the Monster Blood Tattoo trilogy is, so imagine a world like, it's kind of like Charles Dickens, where you have it's I don't want to say it's medieval, but it's old century, and there are monsters that are killing humans and humans that are killing monsters, and it's been going on for millennia and nobody knows why. And there's this little boy who happens to be a monster himself. He looks human, but he's very short, but he's super strong and he can talk to monsters.
Attack on Titan. Attack on Titan.
Not even. He doesn't transform or anything.
Attack on Titan.
Cough, cough.
Okay. Uh-huh. So, okay, so this little boy, he can speak to monsters, and then it's about his journey in finding out what's been happening.
Yeah, so it's him finding out what he is, because he was raised in an orphanage, and he starts going on this adventure with this woman who she's a monster hunter, and he realizes that along the journey he can do certain things. Like it takes a lot of manpower to kill a monster. Like a monster can slaughter like 12 soldiers right off the bat, and he finds out that he can kill them rather easily. But he feels this guilt every time he kills a monster. He feels this guilt. And there are people in society called sedoners, and it's like they're monster lovers and they're ridiculed for their feelings and their empathy. And he finds out that, he has a couple monsters that look after him, and they're friends of his, and they're like, you have these sympathies because you're one of us.
Okay. So I guess then the story continues from there, and
Yeah, we find out about his. How many books?
how many books are in the trilogy?
How many books are in the trilogy?
Sorry, ignore my trilogy. How many books are in the series?
Three of them.
Okay, so it's a trilogy.
Yes.
I don't particularly like series, because I guess I feel the same way about like games. I don't like games that are continuous, like quests, that you have to go and it's long and annoying. No, give me a combat game, give me a racing game. Let me go, do what I have to do, and leave.
That's it.
Yeah, I don't.
I'm
So
the
I feel
opposite.
the same way about series. Unless they're amazing, then I will read.
Well, you
Always.
never know until you start, I guess. I mean, I like series because I've always been the type of guy, if it's just one and it's great and it's a one and done, like I want more. Sometimes I like a standalone. If it's a standalone, I have no problem as long as it's established there's only one. But what I like about series is you can delve deeper, and you can flesh things out more. And I feel they're also easier to write because you don't like my series is I wrote the first book, and there are so many things that I have to establish and develop and evolve and progress, and I can appreciate that I can do that in time, over years. I don't have to do it all at once. Kind of like Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings, I feel, wouldn't hit as hard if it was just one book, whether that's 300 pages or if it was just a massive tome. I don't think it would hit the same.
But I think that there are some series that are unnecessary series. There are some that I'm like, you could have given me a book of 800 plus pages, and this would have been a perfectly good story, instead of you giving me 4 books of 300 pages that are unnecessary.
My thing is, it depends on how the pacing is done, how the characters are developed, if your plot points are met, if it's engaging. Because I've read some books that I feel are perfect as a duology.
Okay.
Part one, part two, volume one, volume two. It works. You can set things up. They can have a resolution and a resolute ending and it works just fine. Now sometimes like I don't know, it's kind of like movies sometimes, right? Like the first movie is always good. The second is usually the best. The third is kind of meh, and then every film afterwards kind of starts to fall short. It depends on the series. It depends on the writer. Like
I disagree with that movie thing. For example, Fear Street. The first movie was trash. The second movie was excellent. The third was good.
I haven't seen that series, but I don't know.
It's based on the horror series by R.L. Stine, Fear Street.
Oh, okay. He wrote Goosebumps.
Yes. He also wrote Fear Street, which is like for an older audience.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, let me tell you this. It's not really a spoiler. I don't know if you've seen My Hero's World Mission yet.
No, I
Uh,
haven't.
okay,
But
well,
I
this,
will. I will. I have a whole list of movies I need to watch.
okay, well, check it out. Well, the first movie was good. Well, wait, no, you didn't see any of them, right?
No. But it's fine. I mean, I
Okay,
have.
well, the first movie was good. Heroes Rising, the second movie was incredible. And the third movie, it fell short in some ways. Kind of like how the Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy. The first was iconic. The second was really good. The third was very bleh.
Mm.
So I know it depends, but it all depends.
I mean,
Relative.
the ones that there is this. I mean, there are several trilogies that I've read recently that are like that.
Mhm.
The first is good. The second one is not so good. The third is nah. But then there are cases I feel, and I'm just thinking, right? There are
Yeah,
cases I feel that you do have. I don't know if there's like a fresh bout of inspiration midway, but it does save itself. It does save itself. But since we're discussing series and the ideas that you've had so far,
mm,
we're gonna come back to my other question about Bookstagram. Tell us about your books.
okay, sure. So I'll give very limited information. I'm giving it out in little pieces. But the premise is, I know I mentioned it in my post last week. It's about a dragon society, a dragon civilization.
Mhm.
And yes, it's a world of dragons. There are no humans. Although the main character himself is human at a point. He um he ends up on this world of this dragon civilization, dragon society, where you have doctors, engineers, artists, mathematicians, basically every vocation that you see in our society that they have over there, more or less. And
So a
uh,
society.
yeah, it's a society. It's a society. And I was just when I was I started this series when I was 16, and honestly, this idea just it came to me. It found me. I wasn't looking for it at all. I had a group of friends who I would hang out with every weekend, and I would just out of nowhere I started telling them about this world, and I would start engaging them in being a storyteller about battles that these dragons would have, on cliff faces or on random parts of the planet. And they had these weird levels of technology and these unusual contraptions that they were using. And I was just able to talk for like 10, 15, 20 minutes on end, like I was reading something, even though it was in my head. And it's not like it was rehearsed or anything like that. And I think after 4 or 5 times of doing this, I took a pause and I was like, where is this world coming from? Like, where is it? What is it? Why am I seeing it? And how do I get there?
So just a question.
Yeah.
Had before you started to think up the story and
Hmm.
had you read anything about dragons?
Yeah, I have. I've read a lot of dragon stories when I was in middle school, um, early high school. I think I've read at least like three or four, and they've all had different narratives,
Mhm.
and so dragons have always been in my subconscious.
So what is it that from what you remember about the ones you read
Hmm.
and the one you're working on, what are
Yep.
some of like the differences? Like what makes your story different?
Well, I would want to say. I don't want to say agency because in all the stories I've read, dragons do have agency. They have some sentience and some intelligence. But I feel what makes
Mhm.
mine different is that we explore how dragons see themselves in the world. Like something that I remember from one of the series that I read was that dragons. There was a series I read. It was called the Dragon Chronicles, The Last Dragon Chronicles by Chris DeLacy. It's it's for kids. And I remember that in that series there were dragons that were made out of clay. That this woman and her daughter, they had like this connection from like
Mhm.
their ancestors, and they would make these dragons out of clay, and they would kindle them and pour some sort of life force from this like dragon tier thousands of years old into the dragons, and the dragons were alive. Even though they were made out of clay, they were alive, and each of them had their own little like quirks. Like one of them was a rider dragon, the other one was a listener dragon with big ears, and you could tell her things and she would keep secrets. You know, they were all relatively small. um, so I wouldn't say agency, but I just feel that in my series, dragons talk about time. They talk about how they see the world, like kind of how we get their perspective of what it's like to be them versus how in most literature I feel people just look at dragons and like we are looking at the dragons and we see them for what they are or how we think they are. But in my series, we actually have the dragons looking at the world, telling us how it is for them.
Okay, so I recently, what is it called? It was like dragon, something of like air and something by,
Earth,
I,
Earthsea.
no, not that one. I am terrible with remembering names
It's all right.
for these, like for books. It's tragic, but I can't remember it now. But anyway, it's about this female who discovers that she has a connection to dragons, and it's a world where you have dragons. They do have a little bit of society, but as you mentioned, it's much more the human connecting with the dragon
Hmm.
than the dragons connecting with themselves.
Yes.
And not only connecting with themselves, but then also us getting the perspective of, okay, how do they see, like if there are humans, if humans pop up, how would they see humans? So that book doesn't have that, as you mentioned. However, there is a series by G.A. Aiken, whom I love, and in her book, it's paranormal, it's like fantasy shifter romance, but she is amazing because she creates this whole world of dragons also. They have several societies. um they you fight, like there's fighting, there's conflict. You have like sand dragons versus um like electricity dragons. You have a variety of dragons, and within it, yeah, it's like water. She has everybody, and
Okay.
what she does is that she blends the two main ideologies behind dragons. So you have like Western and Eastern dragons, and I'm sure you know that they have like different features and abilities
Of
and the
course.
way
Physiologies, all that stuff. Yeah.
physiologies, all of that. So she manages to bring both of them, to this world that she's created in very interesting ways. So I'm saying this to say that I'm excited to see what your book will look like.
Well, I want to read. I want to read this series. Do send it to me later. I want to check it out because wherever dragons are represented, I want to read it and just get inspiration.
It's great because one of the things that I don't like is when books are, I don't want to say unrealistic because I love fiction, but when they don't accept a truth. So in her books, for example, there are moments when because the dragons can shift into humans, right?
Oh, I see.
So
Okay.
yeah, so they meet. There's a dragon queen who hardly ever shifts. She's like, that is for peasants. I don't do that. So she hardly ever shifts. But whenever she meets humans, like initially, humans to her were food, and the author treats this, like it's sacrosanct. The dragon queen, at humans. You just have to accept that, and I like that because it's realistic. You see these tiny little things running around, and you're a carnivore.
Yeah. I mean, what are you gonna do? You're gonna eat them. That's it.
You're not gonna be like, oh, that's my little friend.
No.
No.
Like, no. No, not at all. I mean, I think that there are kind of two parts to that. I mean, on the one hand, dragons do have sentience, and they're like, hey, like
Yes, yes.
I should not eat this, but on the other hand, it's a predator.
It's
Like,
food. Yeah, so in her books, she explores that because eventually there are connections that are made to the human world, and she does come to respect a few of the humans. So there's a progression to it. But it's a psychology that makes sense. It's not, you looking at possible food and being like, "Oh yes, no, it's my friend."
yeah, no, it has to be done right. You know, that makes me think of a series. Well, not a series. It was a book that I read over the summer, and I wish I had found out about it earlier. It's called Tooth and Claw by Joe. No, sorry, not. Yeah, it's a Joe. I think it's no, not Joe. Yeah, maybe I don't, I'm forget. I'm blanking on the name right now.
Tooth and claw. We'll Google it.
Tooth and Claw, and it's basically it's like not Pride. It's like Jane Eyre, which I
Okay.
haven't read, but I know about all the tropes and stuff. It's like Jane Eyre, but with dragons. So you have dragons and propriety. Female dragons get married off. Female dragons, they blush, meaning that like their scales are gold, and
Mhm.
then when they feel, I guess, when they emotionally succumb to a lover or a suitor, their scales turn pink,
Okay.
and they go to all these different meetings and gatherings at people's houses and estates. There is a dragon priest who tries to woo this daughter. Uh, the premise actually it's very interesting, right? So there's this dragon family, and you know there are three siblings. One of them is a lawyer. One is a priest, and there are two daughters. And their father he dies. He's a very big dragon. He dies, and there's a custom that whenever a dragon dies, its children, you know, eat the body
Hmm.
to grow larger. You know, it's kind of like the body is left as inheritance for the kids to eat to become stronger and bigger and all those things. And at the funeral, one of the daughters, her husband, or he comes with his family, and the husband was supposed to have like only one bite, you know, so that the rest of the body could go to the children, you know, so they could grow. And the husband indulges in several bites, and it becomes a legal case because the will the body was supposed to go to the kids, but the husband, who was just the son-in-law, took most of the body and fed it to his children.
Mm.
So at the end of the book, you know, the whole
Um,
lawsuit.
don't tell us at the end of the book.
Yeah, sure. But it was so interesting to see dragons portrayed in that way, you know, because it's like they're going through I don't want to say human experiences. They're going through very descriptive life-oriented experiences
Hmm.
that are relative to our own, but it's through their perspective. It's
Through their
body,
perspective.
through their body and what they do and stuff like that.
And then within that, that is what you would say that you also wanted or also want to create, or that you've also created.
Yeah, in some ways, yes.
So we have mentioned some of the dragon books that you've read.
Mhm.
Um, Discussed a little about the story that you're working on, and if
Mhm.
anyone else would like to see more about the story and the information that you have so far on the dragons that you're going to have in your world, it's on your page at
Yeah,
sam.zamore.
correct.
um, but let us talk a little about what how has Bookstagram inspired your writing, and what do you like about the interactions that you've had so far?
Well, I wouldn't really say that Bookstagram has really inspired my writing that much, you know, because I got on Instagram probably like 2 years ago.
Hmm.
So and I was off. I took a break for like a year, so I was really only on for maybe like, you know, a year and some months. Um, but what I will say is I enjoy just the wholesomeness of the community. Nobody judges. Everyone is friendly. Everyone wants to grow and support each other, and everyone wants to talk about writing, which is so new to me because although I've taken lots of creative writing classes throughout my high school, college, and middle school days, I never really had people to talk about writing with. And it's not even like bouncing ideas off of and stuff like that. It's just talking about the process of what it means to sit down and write and, flesh out characters and just see so many different strategies because I'm used to just doing things on my own, meaning that like, I have my process, it works for me. I don't, I didn't know any other people who I could talk about their process with. Like my process is it's pretty archaic, I'll say. My series that I'm currently writing, I'm doing it longhand, and then I type it all up. So it's a little slower, but that's just how the story is coming to me. So I commit to the process.
So on your story, since we're here, MC Basil Writer is asking if there is a magic system in your novel.
Yes, there is, Basil. There is. There's a lot of sorcery in here.
Okay. Okay. To know much more, I like to go into some stories as blind as possible, because as I was mentioning, like not yesterday, the last live, that I like to be confused. So you drop me in your world, especially if there's a lot going on, which I expect that there will be a lot going on.
Yep.
I like to figure it out. I like to be like, oh, okay, so this is this. But if anyone else has any questions that Sam may be interested in answering about his book, feel free to DM him, right?
Yes, please.
DM him and he'll give you some more details. But do you have a working title as yet?
I do, but that's under copyright. I've had a title.
Okay, it's fine. So when should we expect the book to come out?
I'm hoping sometime in 2022. I have an illustrator. She's doing the last of the maps and diagrams. It's been taking a little while. I have some people who are going to be beta reading for me, and that should hopefully be in the next couple weeks. And while that's being done, I'm doing traditional publishing. I'm not doing self-publishing.
Okay.
So I know it's going to take a little longer. I'm going to be looking for an editor as well as a literary agent, and I have a couple sci-fi publishers I want to look at. So I'm hoping, within 8 to 12 months, it may take a little longer, but I'll be updating you guys, on my page when we have a tentative.
Who are some of the sci-fi publishers that you have in mind?
So there's Nightshade Publishing.
Okay.
Glenn Cook has used a lot for his books. There is Baen, Baen, and there's I think it's Pyre, Pyr.
Mm-hmm.
So
those are the three?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you heard of Eriwan?
No, I haven't.
Eriwan? Anyway, so recently I discovered them and I just had to follow them because all of the books of theirs that I've read that are sci-fi, I've loved. I found amazing. I'll send you their like things so you can probably.
Okay, yeah, I'll check them out.
Okay, so Basil is saying that he also used to write on paper and then type. Same. And he forced himself to type, and now he can't imagine not typing. So you're still writing and typing, and then typing?
Yeah, so here's the thing, and I know it's very weird. My brain works in a lot of ways people can't understand. So I am not strictly like I don't strictly write all my stories by hand. I've written lots of stories, short stories, poems, and all that. My main medium is the computer. Like that's my default. I go to the computer, I type it up, whatever's in my head, I transfer it out. But with this particular series, I don't know what it is about it. I just started doing it by hand, and that's how whatever energy up there, that's just how it comes down. So this will probably be the only series where I write by hand, and I'm gonna stick with it. I respect the process, and I'm not gonna change it. Not for this series anyway.
No, that's perfectly fine. What I like about writing it by hand is being able to keep that story like physically and interact with it physically, as opposed to having to go online or go on my computer, my tablet or whatever, open up whatever, go through. It's not like I can just flip through pages
Yeah,
randomly and add little notes, you know?
yeah, like when it's physical, when it's because I have journals worth of stuff, and it's like you can flip through it, you can read it, and also I'm very tactile.
Hmm.
I like touching paper, and a blank page versus a page that's all filled in. The texture is so different. Like, and it's like part of my soul is on this thing, and you know,
Yes.
there are
Yeah.
smears of pen smears. It's like, how do I say it? When you write a story, you need to give it everything, and it's hard to do that. You give it your blood, your sweat, your tears, all of that stuff. And it's like
Hmm.
you can see that on the page. Like if you write very quickly, you'll see all the dashes and the smears as the ink, drips and stuff like that. So it kind of it resonates in that way, and it's proof of all your efforts and labors are right here.
I agree. I agree. I see that. So Basil is again saying that, it's not good. Like you shouldn't change it because it will disturb your flow. And I
Thank
agree, you
thank
know.
you.
Um, so he also wants to know who is your target audience?
I would say it's adults. I
So it's
don't.
not a young, is it an adult, like a
Oh
young
no, no, no.
fantasy? No.
It's for adults. I don't do YA because I don't think I'd be good at YA. Not to mention, and I've told Basil about this and other friends of mine, that with YA you have to censor a lot of the themes because
Yeah,
not
yeah.
appropriate. Things are too mature, they're too developed. Whereas I feel for adults, you can flesh things out, and if you are an adult writing for adults, you can be more truthful. You know,
Hmm.
draw whether it's drawing from your own experiences or having your characters. They can be more controversial. I
Yes,
feel.
yes. And I find, I find, and some people may not agree with me, coughs and Lindsay, but some people may not agree with me. But I find that with adult stories, it's like it's deeper. It's almost like manga and like
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
basic books
oh
where
yeah.
like with manga, as Lindsay and I were saying, with manga you can go deeper, like you can go harder. There's so much more to stories that it's almost like persons are afraid to touch on, but all of that is accessible in manga. And I feel that with adult stories, some of the themes are, as you said, like they're much more truthful. They're deeper, they're harder, they're like,
It's visceral, it's raw.
yeah, 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 yeah. And I like that.
I love manga too, and the reason why I felt that this had to be written for adults,
You frozen?
not only aside from the violence, just some of the themes. So psychological, there's PTSD, there's cynicism, there's pessimism, there is rage and inner frustration and turmoil, and I feel that if you can't really express that to young adults because teenagers don't really need to they don't need to go through that, but also too it's the teenage experience. It's hard, yes, but as we all learned, when you become an adult, everything kind of it gets. I'm not gonna say it gets worse, but you go through more stuff. You go through a lot more stuff.
Just to like add a note there. I don't know. I was speaking to when I was speaking to Amrita, who was my first guest. We were discussing some of the books that we read while teenagers as
Mhm.
compared to some of the books that are currently being read. You know, and the fact that at when I was like 14, I was reading Anne Rice last year, and I was very disturbed, like very disturbed, because that book is highly disturbing. But I feel that when it comes to literature, when it comes to books, if you do want to have a teenager or a younger person read something that is a bit more intense and I believe more realistic, it's good to have it done with a guide. So whether that guide is like it's like a friend or a teacher or something, but I do feel that some of that needs to exist in the young adult world, in like the teenage world, because Otherwise, there would be a disconnect. You're coming from everything is rosy and marvelous and woof, and then all of a sudden you're an adult, and it's like,
Well, this is what I think. I agree with you. I think that, like, because some of the young adult books I read, they're not all rosy and prim and stuff. It's more like there is violence, there is of different kinds, as well as gritty elements and psychological turmoil, but it's toned down, you know, it's
mm.
toned down. Like I remember, for instance, there was a series, right? It's one of my favorite series as a kid. It's called The Keys to the Kingdom by Garth Nix. And
Oh yeah, I love his work.
oh yes. So did you read the series? It was like my
Probably.
first.
I read
Okay.
it probably.
So one of the scenes at the end of the book, I'm not going to go too much into it.
Please do.
The main character, I was surprised just by, you know, it wasn't written really for like it was violent, but it wasn't as violent as it could have been.
Okay.
But you know, the character he gets impaled, not by anyone in particular, you know, but he lives and he's just fine. But I remember reading that when I was 13 years old, and I was like, oh wow, like he almost died.
Oh wow.
Yeah, like I was like, wow, he almost died, you know, and it's like it wasn't detailed in any bloody way, but like the character, like he was breathing hard and all these things, and I was just like, oh wow, like he almost died, and it was presentable for a 13-year-old to read. So
Okay.
you know, the way it was presented was just fine. It got the message across. The stakes were clearly shown. Okay, these stakes are very high. His life is on the line, type thing, and the character goes through other, you know, crises and travails throughout the series that are age appropriate. You know, it's not too extreme or anything like that because he is 13 years old.
So one of the authors who surprised me, honestly, with what I think it's a young adult book, but I can accept it as like an almost adult book, like a new adult book,
Mhm.
um, which is the series by Holly Black, The Cruel Prince, The Wicked King, and Queen of Nothing. Right? When I first looked at those books, I was like, right? I started reading, and the way the Cruel Prince starts off, like I stopped. I was like,
Too much?
Holly,
Too much?
Holly, woman, what are you doing? You know, and from there, she goes hard, and she goes hard as you mentioned. It is hard because it starts off like and it does progressively mess with the psyche. There's a lot of like psychological tension. There's a lot that happens, and there's a lot of trauma and horrible experiences. But it's all done so well. Like her writing is so well. It's so good. It's so flawless that I'm like, okay, like I would give this to like little people to read. Like they may be traumatized, but I will be there afterwards. I will sit them down and be like, it's okay, but you need to read this book. Like, because, and I think that that also is something that you mentioned. Like, if it's done well, if it's treated well, if it's, as you said, like age appropriate in a way that people who are reading it can understand that, you know, yes, it is fantasy, and you know, you can still have a disconnect. I think that it can be done.
Yeah, it's very. I want to say you have to be. I don't want to say you have to be delicate with it, but you just, if we're gonna make a metaphor here, you have to be a good chef where you know how to mix the ingredients just right. Because if you
Yeah.
don't, it's gonna be very bad, you know, and it
Yeah.
can mess up some kid's mind.
Yeah, yes. Like I wouldn't give The Cruel Prince to like a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old, maybe like a 15-year-old onwards.
Mhm.
But there are books that I believe you should introduce.
Oh yeah, I mean, I know one of the things like okay, so a big theme in this series of mine is war, and I've read a lot of books as you know, young adult teenager that dealt with war and battle, but I think the big difference between that subject being touched on for young adult versus grown adults is for adults it's a lot more you know, literally more guts as well as the why the war is going on. You see the greed and the corruption of human nature and what people are going to do to get what they want, versus when you're reading those topics as a kid or juvenile. It's more okay. There was people were fighting, but it's not as bloody, and the motives for the war are a lot. It's not as fleshed out. People will invade an army, will invade, a castle or an empire because we wanted their land, we wanted this, we wanted that. Versus if you talk about it as adults, it's we wanted to
It's
suppress.
still the same thing, dude.
It's not the same. It's not.
It's still the same.
Yeah,
I
is. They
dislike
talk about it
reading
different.
about war. I dislike like watching war movies because I find war ridiculous. And this is coming from someone who has family in the army. I just look at them and I'm like, why are you
Yeah,
there?
it's a very hard topic. It most definitely is. And I don't support it, but I read about it because one of the things I feel about that topic is it expresses the worst aspect of human nature, and
Mhm.
it shows our true animal nature. If you believe, that people have animal or bestial tendencies. And that's why I think that genre, as much as it is, it's full of revulsion and people are averted to it. It's an interesting look at how bad people can behave
I
and
don't
what
know. I think I had a lot of it like while I was at school. We read a lot. Um, and we read and watched and analyzed so much of it
Mhm.
that I think I have created like very definite views on it that I'm like, I'm an adult. I don't have to deal with this anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah. But I mean, as you mentioned, so in your story you have it and it's something that does happen, so it does need to be analyzed and it does need to be discussed. But yeah, I'm like war.
that's okay. I don't think most people do when they live it and see it, or they have people who are affected by it. So completely understandable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. I feel that this is one of the things that I really like about books. The idea that you can enter a world that is you can enter into different worlds. You can choose which world you want to enter. And at times, you can even choose the degree of whatever you'll encounter in that world. So, as you mentioned, it could be a case where you have conflict, but the conflict is appropriate for 13-year-olds. But then
Exactly.
again, you can jump into something that you're reading, like the full story of Hotel Rwanda, and you're living through that. You're reading like accounts, true life accounts, and you're like, like wow.
Yeah, the level of depth is so infinite.
Hmm.
And, I feel like with books of any kind, the level of depth really determines. It's kind of like you go to a buffet, how much do you want to eat? And,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
how do you feel after you leave the buffet? Do you want to be satiated? Do you want to feel like you have a little bit more in your stomach, or do you want to feel like you're sick?
Hmm.
And like it all depends on, how much you can consume and what you're in the mood for that particular time.
What you're in the mood for. Yes. Well, Sam, thank you so much for sitting down with us today. It was great talking to you. I
It's
know
already
we
12
discussed.
o'clock.
Yeah, well,
I'm not
we
even
have
looking
15 minutes to go.
Oh, I'm not even looking at the time. I was so engaged. Like there are clocks behind me. I haven't even
We
looked.
have 15 minutes to go. I try not to make this go too long, although it does keep running away from me because the
It's fine.
conversations are also interesting. But for persons who have to like go and do other things.
Oh, it's all good.
But it's been great talking to you. Hopefully, what I do want to do is sit back down with guests who may want to return so that we can continue, our
I would love to.
conversations. Yay! So we can do that again some other time. Um, I am looking forward. So everyone who doesn't know Sam, please go on his page, sam.zamore, and have a look at his stories, the story he's working on. It's about dragons. We did talk a little about it here on the live, about this dragon society. and we have the view of the dragons themselves as opposed to just humans looking at dragons. But we're able to see how the dragons interact and what are some of the conflicts that they would have in this world that Sam is creating. Yay!
Such a great description. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I listen. I pay attention. I pay attention.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So thanks to everyone who joined. It's been
Thank
great
you.
having all of you. See you again on the next live. And thank you, Sam. Have a great day.
My pleasure. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye-bye.